So I recently watched a 2019 remake of the first Pokemon movie, and it was probably the worst scum of the earth I saw in all of 2019. Easily trumping the god-awful duo from hell of the Aladdin remake and the Lion King remake. I know, yes, we got some bold accusations and opinions coming straight out of the gate here. So today, I'm gonna go ahead and try to rip this film to every last micro shred that I possibly can, just to feel some kind of redemption for the assaulting of my eyes through multiple viewings of this atrocity. But first, I've got a few things to say about the original movie. So if you don't want to hear me blabber on about the first Pokemon movie and why it's incredibly epic, then just skip to this point in the video and it'll take you right to the reckoning that you were looking for. But if not, just sit back, grab a box of Side Pops with your free Pokemon spoon that came inside, and let me take you back to the simpler times of my life. Just like many other 90s kids movies, my older siblings got me to watch a prehistoric laserdisc of this movie when I was but a wee lad. Loved the thing all the way through and cried like the pathetic child I was at the ending, okay? Not even joking, this was one of the main obsessions of little Ben 11. I mean, back in the day, I could quote this movie inside and out just from watching it over and over again on my adorable little DVD player that was covered in Cheeto prints and dried out high C. I just couldn't handle the immense friendship on display here that made me overwhelmingly invested in an anime boy and his pet rat. Unfortunately, another common trait of these 90s kids movies that I loved way back when is that they are utter garbage. Air Bud, stinky, The Sandlot, egregious, Free Willy, astonishingly bad, Space Jam. Okay, you got me there. But the question is, what elaborate title shall be bestowed upon this majestic display of heroism and friendship after a rewatch in my olden age? Stupid. So extremely, incredibly stupid.
We used the most advanced techniques to develop your awesome psychic powers. Awesome psychic powers.
Pokemon the first movie is about 3 Pokemon trainers named Ash, Brock, and Misty who travel to a mysterious island in search of the world's greatest Pokemon trainer, and instead find a dollar store James McAvoy Pokemon that plots to take over the world with his army of clone Pokemon. Now my scathing word attachment to this film is completely immovable, that's not gonna change. But thankfully, there is a catch. Heh. Catch. Most of the stupidity found in this movie is something that actually adds to my enjoyment of the film. Pokemon has never been a series about subtlety. It's about fun, goofy characters going through a many number of over-the-top animeisms that you're not supposed to take seriously. When the side quest villains trick the main characters into thinking that they're a Viking boating service,
We take you, yeah? We Vikings are used to big wave.
it's so out there in a cheesy kind of way where it becomes a hilarious joke rather than a typical bottom-of-the-barrel kids movie joke. So while a lot of these characters and plot beats may be considered stupid, most of them fit into the overall campy tone that they were going for here. On top of that, the film is actually pretty well made in parts. I'm just gonna go ahead and say this right off the bat. This introductory scene of these characters is the best. Period. There is a distinguished and enjoyable dynamic set up between Ash, Brock, and Misty immediately, and then this rando shows up out of nowhere and wants to beat up Ash's pets with his own pets, and it might low-key be one of the most epic things I've ever witnessed in my entire life. Second only to the Moto seduction scene. I mean, who isn't seduced by this? And this epicness is mainly due to the animators vigorously carrying it with their underpaid backbones. The animation is just so creative and fluid with how each one of these moves are shown off from the game. Not to mention, there are so many different angles and perspective shots that present this somewhat bland writing into a heart-bumping thrill ride. They even slowed down the movement in certain intervals of the animation so that every action from the Pokemon and even the trainers had a noticeable wind up or wind down. Squirtle slowly sucks in the air for a few seconds and then unleashes his bubbles of death upon his enemy. After his Machamp faints, the opposing trainer stomps his feet and slowly rises with anger. Even the thrown Pokeball gently flows through the air for a little while until unveiling the Bulbasaur inside. Gosh, I'm trying to use educated vocabulary while describing this movie, but it just feels wrong. I love this scene. It's the kind of thing that manages to make me feel like a kid again, rather than making me roll my eyes with how silly it is. The enthusiasm and energy that I feel here are things that I long to be experienced in the stuff I make. It is undoubtedly the best scene in the entire movie, without question. Unfortunately, there is another 70 minutes in this film that managed to make me either annoyed or second-hand embarrassed for it.
Brother, my brother, tell me what we're fighting for. We have got to end this war.
The weird thing is that they managed to keep some elements of goofiness, which shine every now and again, mainly through the Ash Gang, Team Rocket, and some stellar music choices. But the plot goes in ways where it reminds me of one of those early Tim Burton remakes where they took the whimsical visuals and story and switched the lights out for no reason. Now, I'm okay with the movie having serious conflicts and genuine tension for what's gonna happen, but it's the overbearingly dark tone that I have more of an issue with. This tone just doesn't fit well with the over-the-top nature that Pokemon embodies in the slightest. When everything from the soundtrack to the story itself is telling you that it's really serious and mature, it makes the rare corniness look a lot more stupid in this context. And the fact that it's rare in the first place just really makes me miss the camp and the fun of that opening scene. Not to mention that there are entire minute-long scenes that could have just been whacked and the movie would be exactly the same. Like, why did Mewtwo conjure up a storm Palpatine style to keep weaker trainers from being able to reach the island? Wouldn't it make more sense to have all of the Pokemon to make clones and not just a select few that are stronger? And why did Mewtwo have to have a battle between his clones of Charizard, Venusaur, and Blastoise and the trainer's natural Pokemon? Why didn't he just cut to the chase and capture all of the Pokemon in his weird black Pokeballs to begin with? Now, I would be fine if this scene was treated with the same shiny veneer of an over-the-top nature and impressive animation from that first scene, but it's very serious and the good Pokemon can't beat the bad ones and the biggest baddie, Mewtwo, is gonna steal all the Pokemon and make even more evil clones. Oh no! Ugh. Now listen to me, I'm psychoanalyzing a freaking Barbie dollhouse. Look at this yellow coffee table next to the purple couch. This furniture doesn't match at all. I will never in my life buy this demon spawn for any child I kidnap or even have. I know it's for kids, but I'm just saying that it's not a great movie for 9,000 IQ big-brained adults like me to watch. Even though that opening scene was the perfect linguine brain food for my all-powerful galaxy brain. And in retrospect, it may sound like I'm being pretty negative about this movie right now, but there are still aspects that I enjoy enough on a personal level to say that it's a decent movie. The film is very fast-paced and it makes me forgive the odd pointless scene here and there. The animation throughout is a joy to look at, minus a few ambitious shots that didn't age too well. And despite my critiques of the tone, there are still a few corny cheese casserole moments that shine through every now and again. So overall, solid 6 out of 10. I acknowledge that it's nowhere near the level of The Shining, Dark Knight, and especially not Space Jam, or any other timeless classic for that matter, but I actually had a fun experience while reliving my childhood this time, so that's a feat on its own. Now you may be thinking, is this man really giving his closing statement already? He barely even touched upon Mewtwo or the ham-fisted positive messages that were shoved in there. Well, my astutely inquisitive viewer, the reason for that is our next film is going to inspire a whole lot of conversation towards those topics. Hey, can we bring him in from the dressing room right now? Alright, cool. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you the product that every single creature walking this earth and their mother was asking for, the 2019 remake of the first Pokemon movie! Yeah, maybe a few more minutes in the dressing room won't hurt.
Just grab the wheel, we hail from the turning waves of cinema straight.
Sit down! We're in trouble, get someone a call!
That's when we rush to give it our all. That far horizon's got our name. We'll never be the same.
Come in? Well, it'll cost ya!
But if ye tell a good tale, we may just take you anyway.
I need names. I need the name, address, social security number, and Club Penguin login of whoever's idea it was to create this abomination. Oh mama, you better step aside, Lion King 2019, because there's a new kid on the block that's about to put you in your place of the second worst remake of 2019. Gosh, I'm sitting here writing this, just trying to think of where to start with this monstrosity. But I have no idea. Okay, so I usually like to start out with positives when I talk about something. So here are my positives for the Pokemon movie 2019 remake. Ryan Reynolds isn't voicing Pikachu. Okay, so now how about we throw some cons in there? The voice acting is jaded and completely deprived of any charisma whatsoever. The pacing is more sluggish than anything I saw in Turbo, and the characters have a very weird habit of just regurgitating exposition like they're in a school play. Gosh, there's more criticisms to go around here than my unhealthy obsession with Pokemon cards. So you know what? It might be 10 times more obvious than talking about how the acting sucks in the room, but I've got to go right out of the gate with what makes this thing internally broken. On occasion, people like to come up and ask me, "Hey Ben 11, why do you think Lion King 2019 is a bad movie? It's got all the same characters and songs that you loved from the original. It's just been modernized into a new generation." A simple question with a simple response. When you rip the color, movement, and expressive facial animation out of a cartoon, it makes the world much more boring and counterintuitive in my opinion. Cartoons aren't supposed to be realistic. That's kind of the whole point of this medium of animation that we have created. To express ideas and concepts that might be too hard to replicate in a real life shoot, and maybe even make them look good along the way. Oh, screw all that malarkey. All of these focus tests tell me that the babies are into photorealism nowadays. Johnson, meh, whip up some photorealistic sets in Blender for me real quick. Right away, sir. Meh. Sir? How many particle effects do you want in this movie? All of them. Well, looks like we can add yet another eyesore to this list of embarrassing remakes from old animated movies. Go figure. But you know what? At the very minuscule least, I could say that something like The Lion King was somewhat decently made. They actually managed to emulate very detailed and realistic environments in a convincing way for that film. Unfortunately for this movie, the entire thing comes across as if it was a fan project completely thrown together on a weekend in Blender.
When you render an animation, Blender opens a new window where you can see the progress of the render. To stop the render before it's finished, you can just close this new window. I'll let this render for a while, and then I'll stop the rendering process before all of the frames have been rendered.
The materials and textures in this film are next level atrocious. It feels like they just animated the entire movie and then unleashed an army of wax machines that just went to town shining every single surface in sight. There are so many materials in this film, including the table, the floor, some of these pillars that just feel way too shiny. Everything feels so fake and artificial with very little detail added on to the actual environments and models in each scene. Just take a look at this scene in comparison to a similar location from the first Kung Fu Panda movie. The difference is just night and day between an animated movie from 2019 and an animated movie from 2008. There's also the criticisms of the somewhat photorealistic animation completely clashing with the cartoonish character designs. But that was discussed enough during the whole Detective Pikachu fiasco, and it's pretty much just the same thing here. Speaking of character designs, listen guys, you see these character designs that were created for the original show? Yeah? They were not designed for a 3D environment. I am getting serious horrid flashbacks to when they tried to shove Timmy Turner into 3D. These designs are hideous to look at. The heads are way too big, the teeth make me want to pull out my own, and I'm not sure who thought it would be a good idea to put the length of a football field in between their eyes. Now it is true that many of these issues I have with the designs are due to the animators trying to keep it as faithful as possible to the originals, but many of the design choices made to fit a 2D art style just don't turn out well when they're translated into a 3D space. I didn't watch episode 1 of the TV show being horribly disgusted at Ash's eyes being 10 feet apart. It's the kind of thing that you just don't question because it's a drawing that isn't supposed to imitate reality. 3D animation is of course one step closer to reality than older animation, and the photorealism isn't really helping any of these characters either. If I could even call them characters. While the first film had a tonal shift that irritated me to no end, it also had a little something that managed to keep me somewhat engaged throughout. And that little something was none other than old Mewtwo over here. Now he's definitely a cliche and a half because of the failed science experiment origin, but I would have to say, for what it's worth, he's actually a pretty intimidating villain overall. This is mainly due to the commanding and stern English voice performance that isn't a very conventional villain voice in its approach, but also pretty intimidating at the same time.
So, you say I am wrong? That you are not this human servant, you are his friend? You are as pathetic as the rest.
And despite the cliched origin, his motivations are clear as day, and most of the things he does have a pretty decent reasoning attached to him. If I were brought into this world by a band of unsympathetic scientists who only care about me for research purposes and nothing else, I would probably be a little ticked off as well. Oh, but guess what? You're never gonna see this coming. They got rid of that too. They took the only sliver of edginess from the original and nerfed the psychosis out of it. Instead of Mewtwo having just a small amount of completely justified negative feelings towards these scientists, he just gets confused, and that's why he freaks out and blows up the entire facility.
Who am I? Where am I?
Yeah, you would think that the most powerful Pokemon in all of existence would be able to grow the 2 brain cells necessary to comprehend this situation, but nope, it's a kids movie, so no one can have a single negative emotion for another in any way, shape, or form. Same thing goes for the main cast of characters. The enjoyable dynamics have been completely stripped away and replaced with the dynamics of your average episode of Care Bears.
That was breakfast. This is lunch.
You can't battle on an empty stomach, right? Eating is part of training.
Oh yeah, you said it. That's our Brock.
What are you talking about, you stupid moronic son of a— All of them. Every last one talks to each other as if they're babbling 2-year-olds. They have no character. They are shallow husks of nothingness that merely exist as devices to show off a sequence of events and maybe make you cry at the end. And if that wasn't enough to make me completely despise these plastic action figures, they have a very weird knack of turning into a typical ending explained video and just saying the implications of a scene out loud.
A waste of time. Since my creation, I've been far stronger than any Pokemon alive.
You sure? You never know until you try.
It is so frustrating to be thinking about what's being implied in the scene, only to be taken straight out of the movie by these things being pile-drived into your head by the characters. Now, the exact same thing happened multiple times in the first one as well. I'm not gonna deny that, and it was just as irritating then. But for some reason, it's been multiplied to the nth degree in this train wreck. And this multiplication only really has one explanation for why it was implemented in the first place. You know, it's pretty incredible that I've gone this long without talking about one of the main reasons that this remake is just so unbearable to watch. So I guess now's as good a time as any. A neat little fact about the original movie is that it quite barely met the feature-length standard with a runtime of about 75 minutes. Now I'd say it's a fair shot in the dark to say that this is the reason why I never became irritated with the pace of it. The movie was just over before I even had time to become irritated. Thankfully, with this newfangled runtime of an excruciating 97 minutes, I had plenty of time to build up as much raging hatred and content as possible. Yeah, you heard me right. The creators of this film took the razor-thin plot that barely fit 75 minutes and stretched it to mere millimeters. How did they do this, you ask? By including hundreds of even more pointless shots and sequences that exist only to pad out the runtime. Some of these shots include showing Team Rocket climbing out of the sewers, showing the whole gang eating their lunch, Brock creepily flirting with the female Pokemon trainer, Mew messing around with Meowth in the sewers, several shots of the Pokemon being captured by Mewtwo, Charizard being unleashed from his black Pokeball captivity, Mew taking off and putting on Ash's hat, a random close-up on the big evil building, Charizard spitting fire at the Dragonite carrying the letter, a literal entire 3-minute long sequence of explorers finding a Mew fossil in the jungle that only needed to be a throwaway line just like it was in the original. And so on. You know, I think that we've all learned a few very valuable lessons in this discussion today. Pokemon is actually really stupid, but can be entertaining on a few occasions. 2D animation is incredibly impressive and never really ages all that much. And above all else, stop shoving these animated movies into realistic settings, you disgusting studio head slugs!